On New Year's Eve 1964, the Kinks were playing to a rowdy crowd of screaming fans who were dancing the night away when Ray Davies spotted Mick Jagger standing in the front row. But Mick wasn't dancing. He was standing perfectly still, glaring at Ray. They were playing all day and all of the night just before midnight, as Ray remembers seeing Mick perform with the Stones at Hornsey Art College a couple of years back. He wishes Mick would have been dancing to his songs instead of trying to look into his eyes to figure out what he was up to. That suspicious stare would become all too familiar to the Kinks. Their music ignited rebellion in young people with their aggressive riffs, sarcastic, detached lyrics, leading to unprovoked hostility from the establishment who saw them as a threat. To the Kinks, it was just rock music that made the audience elevate to riot levels. To others, it felt like confrontation. Someone commented that the Kinks scared him when he first heard them, and honestly, the reaction makes sense. But perceptions and reality are often oceans apart. Oh, they were a menace at times, no question. Mostly immaturity and no more than any other groups at that time. Their raw, aggressive sound and rebellious attitude made them pioneers of punk long before the genre had a name. Ray tells the wild tales that included teenage Dave Davies with raging hormones that led to a trip to the hospital, and later he was dragged out of the hotel by the hair of his head by the police in Copenhagen, and having to investigate someone falling off a fire escape into the bins below in the middle of the night. Maybe the hostility can be attributed to their provocative name. One night in a pub, when someone commented on Dave and Pete's fake leather capes and kinky boots being similar to Honor Blackman of the Avengers, the name stuck. Ray hated it. He writes in his autobiography, "I hated the name, but what did I know? I hated my own name even more, but I had been walking around with that all of my life, so who was I to complain?" And there it is. Beneath the wild stories and breakdowns is his quintessential British brand of pessimism and self-loathing, delivered, of course, in the endearing tone we've come to expect. He later refers to himself as the most insecure of the insecure. You'll see this play out throughout this story of a group's rise to the top amongst future legends while plagued with turmoil throughout. It's a fascinating look at another place and time, one filled with the same everyday struggle against uncertainty and self-doubt, which leads to ongoing conflict even at the height of success. He describes in his autobiography the changing world while he was at art school. The swinging 60s had arrived. Outside my narrow, self-centered world, there was a style revolution in progress, and it seemed that the smart students at the college were rushing headlong into it. People were talking about a place called Carnaby Street. Tab collars and Chelsea boots were in, and beatniks, who had been until now the hippest of the hip, were starting to put their long pullovers into mothballs or give them back to their granddads. Overnight, it was fashionable to be working class and at art college. I was already working class and not required to change. The early incarnation of the Kinks found themselves in style at a time when music and fashion were intertwined like strands of DNA. This is helpful as they played at local youth clubs and dances alongside with competing groups like the Moontrackers, which includes lead singer Rod Stewart, who Ray describes as the Elvis of Muswell Hill. As they were building up their local following in 1963, news broke that President Kennedy had been killed. As Ray walks home that night, he thinks to himself, what sort of country would allow such a thing to happen? All my recent musical influences had come from that faraway place, and this news made me feel that I never wanted to go there. He says he felt convinced that there was going to be a world war and that atomic bombs would start dropping on North London at any moment and annihilate us all. He started painting a grim picture of America that will come back to haunt him. With the Kinks line up together, their inexperienced managers asked Beatles manager Brian Epstein to come audition them. After a few cover songs, he sizes them up and down and says he will have to consider the ramifications of having another four-piece group on his roster, leaving them hopeful. He leaves with their manager Robert, who agrees to give Epstein a ride home. Robert comes running back upstairs a while later, red-faced, asking for help because his Mini won't start and there are no cabs available. They look out the window and see a distinguished Brian Epstein slip in the mud as he tries to help Robert push the car until they finally get the engine to turn over. Ray says it was a cold winter night, but Epstein was sweating beneath his cashmere coat. They assumed that ended any chance at getting him to sign them. They soon sign on instead with Larry Page. Ray points out the differences between everyone behind the scenes working to get them a record contract, coming with different class backgrounds and not really having anything in common except an end goal. Ray says their music made everybody associated with the group feel classless until the music stops. During their first recording session at Pi Records in January 1965, Ray says that Dave played a guitar chord while tuning up in the studio, which fed back through the amplifier. He describes the moment. This caused the chord to oscillate between the pickup on his guitar and the Vox AC30 amp that Dave was plugged into. On top of the Vox was a little green amp that David started using to get the fuzziness sound. The engineer who was placing a mic in front of Dave's speaker jumped backwards. Dave smiled and played an even louder chord. He says the engineer ran out of the building after that due to the piercing sound. Ray describes Dave at 14 like this. He was always an agile little hard nut, but a bright kid at school. His exploits with the girls from the local convent school were turning him into a local legend. And on top of this, his guitar playing had improved beyond my wildest expectations. During this time, they went through several name changes, including Boll Weevils after a Bo Diddley song, then the Ravens before settling on the Kinks. They found themselves in John Stevens' boutique on Carnaby Street being fitted with new stage gear, which included green skin-tight costumes and leather trimmings in an Avenger-esque look. Ray is sent to the dentist to get his gap between his teeth corrected. As the dentist starts up the drill, Ray asks him what he's going to do. He explains that he's going to cut away his 2 front teeth and put permanent caps over them, which prompts Ray to jump up and make a frantic call to his managers in refusal. They settle on temporary ones for now, which he is wearing during the Kinks' first appearance on Ready, Steady, Go. He says he has the biggest front teeth since Bugs Bunny. The cameraman is overheard asking if they want a close-up on the lead singer with goofy teeth. They mimed their songs, and afterwards Dave and Pete won the cast over with Dave's good looks and Pete's gift for conversation with the effervescent host Kathy McGowan. Ray keeps a quiet distance. Their picture appears in the New Musical Express, and soon their single, Long Tall Sally, enters the chart at 42. He describes the feeling. Fame and fortune seemed to be waiting around the corner for us, as if they were only 2 stops on the 102 bus. As Ray begins writing songs, he will soon find out that the contract with Pi Records would leave them with barely enough money to survive. They encounter scoundrels at every stop along the way. The Kinks are booked to play the Cavern in Liverpool, where if manager Bob Wooler likes you, then other promoters will book you. His approval is vital to the Kinks' future. Ray says without Wooler's approval, they might as well throw their instruments into the River Mersey, describing the Kinks as an untogether group of pretenders from London as they drove north in a converted ambulance they had purchased to play at the most important club in England and the center of the world of the Mersey beat. He describes the band as tired, dirty, and uncomfortable when they arrive. Their tour manager Brian suggests they go clean up in public toilets and change in the ambulance before a gig in front of the most hard-to-please audience in the country, describing their down-to-earth honesty. A real scouse has the ability to ask you a question with an explanation point at the same time. The verdict. Bob Wooler said he would book them again, while a group of local girls praised them and said they were original and even traveled with them in the back of the ambulance to their next show. Let's face it, the world owes a debt of gratitude to the Liverpool girls for spotting real talent back then. And you can bet those agents and managers who went to the clubs seeking out bands to sign based their decision on the girls' enthusiasm for a band, which was a big part of what sold the records anyway. As they continued on their package tour with the Dave Clark 5 and the Hollies, the only song that was earning any praise was You Really Got Me in reviews. Other than that, they felt like whipping boys being criticized at every step by the press. But the fans and other groups were very supportive and encouraging. Dave, who was barely 17, had become the tour raver, partying through the night and barely sleeping, while Eric Haydock from the Hollies attempted to take them under his wings, offering advice and referring to them by their full Christian names of Raymond, David, Peter, and Michael. The more business-minded Dave Clark 5 had a number 1 with bits and pieces on this leg of the tour. Dave Clark stopped and threatened them with punishment when the power kept blowing up and causing them to be delayed, prompting Graham Nash to ask if Dave was cracking up. It was during this tour they were considered sloppy, prompting management to hire a veteran in the entertainment industry, Hal Carter, to improve their act and look. As he goes on a tirade about them needing to drop the blues songs, Graham Nash speaks up and says, "If they want to be a blues act, let them be a blues act, not a cabaret act." He was ignored. Hal takes them to get fitted in Dickensian-styled outfits to fit their personas, including red hunting jackets, white frilly shirts, black trousers, and Chelsea boots. Graham Nash came up to them as they stood waiting backstage at their next show and said, "Now you look like Kinks." As they continue on tours, they meet different name-dropping promoters after each show who come in and critique them. Ray describes them like this: "Waiting for the local impresario was like waiting to meet the Pope, only the Pope would have probably been more down to earth." Their working class sarcasm, which may have helped them survive school, didn't always land well in professional settings. Hal Carter, who helped create their new look, was the worst of the critics. Ray details a hilarious night on the road when things came to a head. He wanted to turn them into acts like Billy Fury or Cliff Richard. One night after a performance, Hal burst into their dressing room. "You thought you were good tonight, I suppose," in his Scouse accent. "No, how honest." "No, you can't fool me. I definitely saw a smile on your face. Dave was the only one doing it right tonight. Quaife was posing. Avery was spending his time dreaming of the next wank, and you spent your time looking at Anita. Give us a break, Hal. We were working our bullocks off." He got right up in Mick's face. "A load of cack. One day you'll surprise me and rave together on cue." Ray was standing like a spastic, and Dave was the only one raving on his bloody own. Dave stood on a chair by the dressing room window with a vodka in his hand while urinating out the window, turned and said, "That's because I'm a raver," as he pees on Hal's shoes. Hal rolls his eyes. "Charming, why can't you piss in a beer glass like a normal person?" "Hey Hal, you mean to tell me Billy Fury pisses in a beer glass?" At this point, Hal has to really commit himself to his own head not exploding. "Billy Fury is an artist. He doesn't piss anywhere except in the toilet, which is where your future is." "Oh, forgive me, Hal, for mentioning Billy Fury in the same sentence as piss. But while we're on the subject, why don't you piss off?" Hal wipes his boot and says, "All right, but where would you be without me?" Then turned to Ray and said, "Come to my room tonight to talk about new material. Oh, and Quaife, you've got too much makeup on tonight. Or is that left over from last night? You know that big white sink at the top of the B&B? Well, it's called a bath. I want to see you in it." "Yes, sir. Does Billy Fury bathe every day, sir?" "Fury is a consummate artist, and don't you forget it. He is immaculate at all times. In all the years I've known him, I've never known him to go to the toilet or the bathroom." His tirades were unnecessary, but ultimately he wanted what was best for the band. Before he departed for good, he gave Ray one last piece of advice on personalizing the song they were working on in the studio by starting off with "Girl" instead of "Yeah." The recommendation would turn out to be gold. The original demo of "You Really Got Me" was not pop enough to be released. When they recorded it for the album, Ray was not satisfied with how the song sounded and wanted to re-record it, but was repeatedly told no. After 2 flop singles, he knew he had to get this one right, or this might be the last opportunity to record. While everyone kept telling him no, Larry Page came up with a solution. They had not yet given Kasner Music the mechanical license to Pi to release the record, which would push back the release date and buy them more time to re-record the song. Pi threatened to throw the Kinks off the label when they found out that they didn't grant mechanical rights. They considered legal action as a violation of the contract, but since there was no money, decided against it. So the Kinks were allowed to re-record the song at their own expense. After the first take, Ray asked for another try, and Shel Talmy reluctantly agreed. He says he was being treated like a spoiled child being able to have his way. Session musician Bobby Graham was on drums, Mick moved to tambourine, Ray was on rhythm guitar, and Dave on lead guitar. Arthur Greenslade was on piano. When it came time for his singing part, Ray says, "I had invented myself and somebody to sing for. At last, I was happy with something I was doing."
Girl, you really got me going. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing.
As the singles waiting to be released, they are booked as openers on 2 Beatles shows. By this point, they have a legion of fans who follow them to see their performances. As they wait backstage at the first show, John and Paul were standing in the wings watching them tune up. Ray claims the following exchange took place. John walks over to Ray and stares at his guitar on its stand by the amplifier. John puts his hand on Ray's cheek in a mocking way and then touches the tone control on his guitar. Ray says he was astonished and felt violated. Is that yours? Once my mom has paid off the hire purchase, Lennon peeks out the curtain at the audience. Excuse me, it's our turn. You're on after us. With the Beatles, laddie, nobody gets a turn. You're just there to keep the crowd occupied until we go on. Then he says to the group, well, lads, if you get stuck and run out of songs to play, we'll lend you some of ours. Ray wanted to shout that they didn't know any of their songs, but the lights dimmed and the show was starting. As the curtains opened, the deafening "We Want the Beatles" bounced off the walls, adding insult to injury. Dave turned up the amplifier, causing feedback as the high-pitched frequency cut right through the screams. The audience went silent as Dave played the opening chords to You Really Got Me. Ray uses Hal's suggestion for personalizing the opening line to Girl. The Kinks had the audience attention as John Lennon and Brian Epstein watched from the wings.
You really got me going. You got me so I don't know what I'm...
The second show that they were supposed to open for the Beatles, they are replaced by a lesser-known band called the High Numbers, who would later change their name to The Who. You Really Got Me debuted at number 27, just as the band made their second appearance on Ready, Steady, Go. Within 5 weeks, it climbed to number 1 and held the top spot for 2 weeks, staying in the UK top 50 for a total of 13 weeks. No small feat in an era overflowing with hit records. In the US, the single also made waves, reaching number 7 and giving the Kinks their first major American breakthrough.
Yeah, you really got me now. You got me so I can't sleep at night.
The venues they were playing that had been previously booked were now selling out, and they were being moved to the headlining position. As they are pursued by fans, they begin to find it hard to leave their home without a game plan. Ray says the imaginary hump on his back began to disappear from his consciousness, but that would be temporary, stating his shyness turned into a strange, naive overconfidence that only naturally shy people can relate to. Just over 6 months earlier, they had appeared on Ready, Steady, Go with his Bugs Bunny teeth, and now he was confident enough to go on television with his signature gap in between his teeth in full display. Back on the package tour with Billy J. Kramer, the audience rioted and tore up the seats. The police were called to restore order. All this left Billy J. Kramer speechless as they apologized. Everywhere they went, the Kinks' music seems to stir an atmosphere of violence from their adoring fans. They were touring with Jerry and the Pacemakers, Gene Pitney, and Marianne Faithfull next. One night on the tour, the entire hotel was awoken by the sound of crashing as somebody fell from the fire escape to a pile of dustbins. They all suspected that someone had been pushed out of Marianne's room and fell from the fire escape. Jerry and Ray investigate who from the tour might have been the culprit, but never did find out. Dave was enjoying all-night parties with Brian Jones, which often included late nights in clubs, run-ins with the police, and an endless stream of girls. During one tour with Manfred Mann, the Stones were playing Oz at the same time. There was a great rivalry between the Stones and the Kinks. During a tropical storm in Brisbane, Mick Jagger appeared at Ray's hotel door yelling about Pete, who he said was the greatest liar alive. He kept yelling, "Pete's an effing liar, Pete's an effing liar." Ray explains that all his friends know this, and it's one of the many reasons they like him. He was more of an exaggerator, but harmless. Mick grabs a beer from the fridge and mumbles "liar, liar" over and over as he walks away. When they went to the studio to record All Day and All of the Night, they had a crowd of onlookers watching from a tiny control room. One of them was Jimmy Page, who Ray says cringed when it came time for Dave's guitar solo. They interpreted it as jealousy from him not being asked to play on the record, or maybe he found it inferior to his own ability, but Dave had the right to play the sound that he invented. The police were often present at their shows to stop rioting while the press about them exaggerated stories of backstage brawls. That New Year's Eve, Mick Jagger stood in front of their stage glaring during their performance. Ray writes "Tired of Waiting for You" on tour in Scotland when he learns his girlfriend might be pregnant. The single is released as they leave for their next tour. On their stop in India, he gets the idea for "See My Friends," where he says he couldn't sleep because of the ants and roaches, while Dave was chased on the beach by a mad dog. The waiters were so thin he didn't want to eat, as the poor sat outside too tired to sweat the flies away. By the time they get to their next stop in Singapore, "Tired of Waiting for You" entered the charts at number 11.
So tired, tired of waiting for you.
When they arrived in Perth, things took a turn for the dark. Customs men stared at them suspiciously. At an interview in Adelaide with a DJ who talked nonstop, Dave stuffed a hamburger into his mouth. The press turned on them with headlines of, "Pommy Kinks go home, we don't need you." The debauchery continued throughout the tour, just like the other ones. As they touched down in Singapore, Tired of Waiting for You was number 1. Ray desperately wants to go home to his new wife when he gets news their visas came through for their scheduled performances in America. He dreaded the trip. They would have to fly into Vietnam, where the war was heating up, to make it from Hong Kong. As they flew into Saigon, accompanied by American jet fighters, they saw fires in the forest below. They waited hours in the airport, guarded by American troops with machine guns, before boarding a flight to Hawaii and then on to the West Coast. He admits to being terrified, too afraid to look at Dave in case he would catch a glimpse of his fear. He says the pilot was impersonating John Wayne, making amusing remarks over the intercom. "Not completely sure which end of the runway to take this SOB out on, but I guess this is the right way." But Dave didn't think it was funny. His negativity is in full display as he describes the pilot as a cringing coward in the face of such manufactured heroism. In other words, "I feel powerless and scared, so I'll knock you down to feel a little more in control." The pilot may have been just as scared as everyone else in trying to lighten the mood. Once in New York, they went to Peppermint Lounge, which he equates to America's Cavern Club, and where the peppermint twist had spawned from. Ray had been bitten by an insect in Hong Kong, and by New York, his ankle is massively swollen, and he was having trouble walking on it. They were due to perform on Hullabaloo, where the promoters insist they perform a dance routine when the cameras cut to them from presenter Frankie Avalon. Instead, when the cameras cut to them, Dave and Mick were dancing cheek to cheek. He says the producer was outraged, and that is when the Kinks made their first bad impression on America's music industry. However, the music fans love them. He calls it character assassination and the plot to destroy us. His analysis: "You see, the Kinks really did it. The Stones and the Beatles might have implied it, but we really carried it off, and it was far too real for the Americans to take."
There's a 24-foot 10-seater. Mysteria Din displays the world's longest moustache. There are 485 active volcanoes in the world today. The most prolific composer of all, Thomas Filippo da Monte, who composed 1,000 madrigals.
Thanks, fellas.
On their following Scandinavian tour while in Copenhagen, they were playing the opening chords to All Day and All of the Night when a side door opened and the auditorium was rushed by police, and a fight started with the audience. They were rushed into a small room until it was safe to leave. Old ladies yelled at them, and the papers threatened to ban rock and roll entirely. The following day's show was canceled. They were confined to their rooms as it was too dangerous to leave. Frustrated, Dave drank a bottle of whiskey and threw the bottle out the window. The next thing they know, riot police stormed the room and dragged him out by his hair. He was beaten to the ground and dragged to the police station. He was arrested for inciting a riot the night before. They barely made it back to London for NME, or as Ray referred to them as the Enemy, Poll Winners Awards concert. They come in second place to the Rolling Stones for Best New Artist, even though the Stones won the exact same award the year before. Ray was furious and discouraged. He now believes they were purposely disqualified for being disliked by the media, pointing to the articles that report, "The lead singer of the Kinks thinks he can sing better than Frank Sinatra," when he actually said he could sing "You Really Got Me" better than Frank Sinatra. Then another falsely reports that Ray thinks Adolf is a good guy, when he actually said he certainly knew how to sell out a stadium. Ray believes that the Kinks' anti-establishment persona is making people hate them as if they pissed on the Mona Lisa. His deep insecurities come rushing back. Soon, Set Me Free enters the charts, and an American tour is set for summer.
If you try, all you gotta do is set me free.
Around this time, Dave and Mick are living together. They begin fighting and can't stand to be around each other. Mick's cymbal severely slices Dave's head at a show in Cardiff, which led the police to come and arrest him. But Dave didn't press charges. Dave went to live back at home with his parents. Mick went into hiding when they brought in drummer Mitch Mitchell for rehearsals until Mick resurfaced. Mitch would go on to join the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
There's always misinterpretations of the real thing, but as you well know, You Really Got Me as one of our biggest hits, and we've put this first in our act, and we want to make it a big action number, you know. And as the fans were throwing things up onto the stage, sweets, so Dave does this guitar thing and sort of whirls it around his head and pretends he's throwing it in the audience. And I do a similar thing with my cymbal, and I caught him an unfortunate blow on the side of the head, you know.
Certainly 18 stitches sounds a bit more than a joke.
Yeah, 16, I think.
Your road manager was reported as saying, though, that trouble had been brewing up within the group for some time. Is there any truth in that?
No, there's no tension. No.
Ray now has a wife and a new baby at home when they arrive in America for the second time. They were playing at the New York Music Center when outside their hotel, Ray says a redneck came up to him on the street and asked him, "Are you a Beatle or a girl?" Ray, never one to back down from sarcasm, replies, turning the insult on its head in the most British way possible. They play in Philadelphia with the Supremes, and he describes the Kinks as unhappy, scruffy, unprofessional louts who shouldn't have been allowed to upstage real professionals. He goes on to describe his views of the US. America, guns. Seeing Kennedy killed on TV made me think the whole continent was full of assassins, serial killers, and mob-style corporations. That kind of fear will amplify every small misunderstanding, feeding into a defensive, combative attitude that will affect how he interacted with everyone. He goes deeper into his thinking, saying, "There we were in the middle of America, milkshakes and hamburgers, cookies and hot dogs, the American dream, yet I felt that the whole country was trying to cover up something that was going bad from the inside." This sense of rot beneath the surface reflects his skeptical worldview and mirrors the way he often wrote about English suburban life too, charming on the outside, quietly repressive underneath.
And his mother goes to meetings while his father pulls the maid.
After shows across the Midwest and then the Southwest, they end up in California. They perform on Shindig in Los Angeles when he discovers his love of malted milkshakes. Then next, the Hollywood Bowl. By this time, Ray says he is completely paranoid and demands his wife be flown out. Backstage at another television show, things finally come to a boiling point when some guy walks up to Ray and accuses them of being late. He says the guy starts making anti-British comments. Just because the Beatles did it, every mop-top, spotty-faced, limey juvenile thinks he can come over here and make a career for himself. Then goes on to call Ray a talentless FUCK who was in the right place at the right time. Ray says something about American pop music being dull and syrupy before the British invasion. He says the guy exploded and mentioned Pearl Harbor and the British socialist government. You're all just a bunch of commie wimps. When the Russians take over Britain, don't expect us to save you this time. The Kinks, huh? Well, once I file my report on you guys, you'll never work in the US again. You're gonna find out just how powerful America is, you limey bastard. Next comes punches, and then Ray storms out of the building, leaving the other groups like the Zombies and Herman's Hermits shocked and confused. He doesn't specify the show where this occurred or what was said after being told he was late that prompted the guy's tirade, but it's an obvious overreaction. But the guy certainly gave his version in the report. Ray envisions himself as Lee Harvey Oswald, decrying himself a patsy once the promoters and unions hear about the incident. Next up, in Cow Palace in San Francisco, there are the first signs of consequences. The promoter refuses to allow them to perform. They appear on stage as to not disappoint and say that they won't let them play when the PA system gets switched off. The Kinks are then bustled out to their limousines and straight to the San Francisco airport. At check-in, Dave sits down his new Gretsch guitar, once owned by George Harrison, and looks back, and the guitar is gone. Stolen. Despite efforts, the guitar was never recovered. It was a devastating loss. This incident added to the string of frustrations and bad luck the band experienced on the chaotic tour. Then, in Spokane, Washington for another set of shows, Ray was in the diner with his wife when he kissed her on the cheek, and he says moments later he was arrested for public indecency. After the tour ends, they are back in England when he describes, "God bless America. The place is great. The real Americans are fine people. But the undercurrent of corruption that I experienced on my first tour never went away." They got news that they were temporarily banned from touring America while the incident is investigated. Then comes the full ban that lasted another 4 years. It hurt him in the US too. You can see it in the charts after they stopped playing there, right in the midst of the British invasion. The Kinks become embroiled in publishing and management issues. Like many bands of the era, the bad contracts they signed at a young age without fully understanding the terms would become a legal battle. Ray especially fought for songwriting royalties and creative control after realizing how much money was being siphoned off by others. He would go on to have a nervous breakdown and not leave his bed for weeks at a time due to all the pressures of what he called overload. With a bad contract, pressures from the label for more hits, and a new family, it's completely understandable. Then in 1969, the album Arthur, or the Decline and Fall of the British Empire, was gaining traction in the United States, of all places. The Kinks have not been allowed to perform since 1965, and now the ban is finally lifted. Some Americans might not have known who Victoria was, but they know an upbeat tempo when they hear it combined with lyrics about being poor but free.
In a land that I love, but what for? I am free.
When describing the ban being lifted, Ray slaps all kinds of negative labels on America before saying, America had banned and therefore harmed the Kinks for no apparent reason, and the result cost us the best years of our lives. America, all of it was waiting in its zoned out, pot-smoking, stupefied splendor. We couldn't wait to get back there. And they did. Over time, Ray's negative perceptions evolved into something strangely affectionate. He would go on to live in New Orleans, embracing the country he once feared. Even after being shot and mugged there, he sampled malted milkshakes everywhere he went and can tell you the best is in New York. He also shared a long, complex relationship with Chrissie Hynde of The Pretenders. So did Ray's insecurities play a role in the Kinks ban? Probably. His negative mindset may have led to him mouthing off to the wrong person. But that same cynicism also fueled the sharp, biting lyrics that gave the Kinks their edge. Ironically, the band forced them to double down on their Englishness, which only heightened their artistic individuality and made them stand out even more. In the end, the very country he once distrusted became an important part of the Kinks' story. America left a mark on them, and the Kinks left one right back.
Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but once you squeeze me tight, you need to grow my spine.